Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 78, The Bird's Nest. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Fran brings Gracie to the Loman's semi-annual Red Star clearance event, and as predicted, Gracie sees things that will haunt her for the rest of her shopping life. Namely, Fran fighting with a stern-faced woman over a green button-down sweater and the vicious barbs the women trade between them. Unfortunately, Fran's behavior, although she did get the sweater, catches up to her when she needs to ask Brighton's science teacher for an extension on his project after she tried to help him after promising not to help him, and it blew up in their faces. Apparently, that stern-faced shopper was his teacher. Fran ultimately prevails and gets him the extension, and Maxwell thinks that he's the one who messed up the project and promises Fran a significant bonus if she's able to get him an extension. Brighton, meanwhile, has found a new science project, namely Sylvia's negative skin reactions to the shellfish she eats that was caught by Uncle Stanley near Rockaway Beach. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
Not necessarily, there's a fun little Cece and Niles subplot, but we can talk about it during our episode discussion.
Excellent. Would you like to take us to scene one then?
Yes, so we open up and Fran and Gracie are outside Loman's. As you mentioned in your summary, it's Loman's semi-annual Red Star clearance event. And so, of course, there are a ton of people out there waiting for Loman's to open up. And as you mentioned, Fran kind of warns, Gracie that, you're going to see things that will haunt you for the rest of your shopping life. And at that moment, there's a lady in a wheelchair who is like, oh, can, anybody help? Or like,
Excuse me, please.
yeah, Gracie's like, shouldn't we help her? And Fran's like, no, like you'd be surprised. Last year, she apparently got up out of the wheelchair and said it was a miracle.
Exactly. When they put out was the Donna Karen.
Donna Karen. Yep. Anyway, it gets closer to opening. Fran warns Gracie to watch out for her nose. And she's like, my nose? What? And then, of course, they are shoved up against the glass of the door. So, yeah. Right before you see the, I guess the store manager owner kind of do the sign of the cross before unlocking the door. And then the nanny breaks away to a clip from Jumanji.
Yes.
Animals running through the hallway of the house. Just to kind of, again, emphasize how crazy, what a madhouse this is. And so when we cut back to Loman's, Gracie and Fran are at this bin and they're looking through sweaters and, Fran gets a part of one green sweater and she's like, oh, that's weird. It's caught on something or something. And she's pulling at it. And then of course we come to find out someone else is holding the other arm of the sweater. And that lady is very serious about this as well. She's like, I've got the cuff, she says it's hers. And Fran's like, well, I've got the armpit. And then this woman grabs Gracie, pulls her next to her and says, I've got your kid.
Right.
Says, her? She's not mine. And then so, of course, she pushes Gracie back towards Fran. And this lady continues, give me a break. I've got my nicotine patch. I'm warning you. I've got my nicotine patch is off. My mother's in town and my boyfriend just left me for my brother.
Right.
And Fran is like, now I'm over 30, single, and I work for her, pointing to Gracie. And so obviously, though, they're in a standstill. So Fran hands her part of the sweater over to Gracie and tells her to hold on and don't let go. So it's Gracie against this, as you described, her stern-faced woman. And the woman's trying to, distract or get Gracie to let go. She says, "Kid, did you see the movie Babe? They ate him at the wrap party."
What a horrible thing.
Yeah, and Gracie's just like, well, I can't hear you. and she holds strong. And then at that moment, we see Fran run up, and she runs with her arms ahead of her. So she ends up being able to get her arms through both of the armholes, and she runs away victorious with the sweater.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the opening scene. Do you have anything to add to that?
Just the sheer look of joy and like celebration on Fran's face when she won the sweater.
It was like she was winning a race,
Exactly.
like going through the finish line, except
Mm-hmm.
she has a sweater on now, backwards.
Right. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Can you
So
take us to the kitchen then?
I would love to. So Fran is in the kitchen and Sylvia's there and Gracie's there, and Fran is bragging about Gracie, saying that the kid is a natural. You know, honey, show her what you did to get those women away from the Calvin Klein rack. And so Gracie, standing, and she points and she says, "Look, there's John John." And Sylvia is also very proud of her and comments, "You don't learn these things in books." And Fran looks at her mother and she notices that there's, butter all over her chest. And she says, "What do you have for lunch over there? You have enough butter that you could have your own last tango in Paris." And Sylvia talks about how she had a lobster that Uncle Stanley caught near Rockaway Beach. And Fran's like, "Ma, they don't even like people to swim in that water. It could be toxic." And Sylvia's like, "What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with these lobsters. They're excellent. They even have 2 tails." Now, as you can imagine, I've never had a lobster, but my understanding is they have 1 tail.
Yes.
Not
2.
Yeah, exactly. So Fran's like, "All right, well, when you grow that second mouth out of your shoulder, you can eat them at the same time." And then we hear the car honking, and Fran's like, "Ma, you made Daddy sit in the car for 2 hours?" And Sylvia's like, "Oh, we got a car phone at a timeshare walkthrough. Now I can sit and call Howard Stern." But why he wants to get screamed at and berated for 2 hours, I will never know. The horn honks again, and Sylvia yells, "Lay off the horn, you yuts." And then I think she leaves, and in comes Maxwell and Brighton. And Maxwell says to Fran, "Have you seen Brighton's science test? He got a 66. And Fran at first is like, "Wow, Brighton, you passed." And then she realizes that's the wrong reaction. "By a hair, that is no good." And so Maxwell tells Brighton, apparently again, that, "We went through this last semester. You keep this up, I'm going to have to send you to military school." And, Brighton and Fran are both surprised by this threat. And Fran's like, "Military school? Nothing but young men, no women for miles around? I mean, for me, it'd be nice." Well, Brighton tries to explain that he's going to be fine because he's got this big science project due. He's been working on it for weeks, and it's definitely going to bring my grade up. He opens the fridge. "Oh my God, where did my moldy strawberry go? Oh no, I'm dead." And Maxwell is clearly not impressed by this science project, and he says, "You'd better think of something else pretty soon, young man, and try to be more inventive than moldy fruit." And Brighton leaves, and Maxwell says to Fran, "I don't want you helping him either." And Fran's like, "I wouldn't dream of it, not after the review my strawberry got." And so Maxwell says to Fran that Brighton needs to learn to do things for himself. And of course, the timing on the show is such that Niles comes in and he hands Maxwell a briefcase saying, "I packed your briefcase, sir." "Thank you," says Maxwell, and he continues with Fran, "You make things far too easy for the boy. He'll never become a man." And what is Niles doing? He's helping Maxwell get ready, including he's holding a little mirror. And as Maxwell looks at his hair, and Niles comments that doesn't have that little boyish thing happening. And then Maxwell flips it for him, and there we are, says Niles. And Fran, of course, notices the dichotomy between what Maxwell's saying about Brighton and how he's behaving. And Fran asks, "Are the kids yours, or does he do everything for you?"
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell did not find that as funny as we did. And he says, "I'm serious. And just because Brighton has a trust fund, don't think I'm going to let him end up jet setting around the world, skiing and yachting and flitting from party to party." And Fran's like, "Oh, he's got too much pride for that. I mean, for me, it'd be nice." Again, showing how if she were in Brighton's shoes, she would be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to add?
No.
All right. Would you like to take us to the office then?
Yes. So we're in the office. Maxwell and Niles are there, and Cece walks in with a bag and with Chester. and he says she's sorry for being late. She had to pack a bag. Her apartment is being fumigated again. So of course Niall says they've tried that before. You always come back.
Uh-huh.
Um, and of course there's kind of like a long just look that Cece gives him, and then she continues by letting them know it's hard to find hotels that accept dogs. Once again, Niles chimes in. Did you promise not to hump the bellboy's legs?
Yup.
Um, so again, after another long look from Cece, Cece says, now, Niles, it's a pity we don't see more of one another. Maxwell, she snaps. Maxwell, I just had a crazy notion. Why don't Chester and I stay here? And of course, like, Niles is looking horrified. Maxwell's oblivious. He's just like working on something, writing something. His head's down, and he's like, "Oh yeah, yes, of course, Cece. Niles will take care of everything." And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, Cece has kind of like a victorious smile on her face, and she hands Chester to Niles. Here you go. You'll need to give him one pill a day, 3 times a day. And Niles is just like, I'll put it in his food. And Cece goes, wrong end. And then
Mm-hmm.
they walk out as Fran walks in. And Fran has a large envelope in hand. And she says, well, I just thank God that I was making tea while opening the mail when this envelope addressed to you accidentally steamed opened.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, inside the envelope are applications for military school. And Fran is upset about this. I can't believe you're thinking of sending my baby away. Who is this man I'm living with? I don't even know you anymore. And Maxwell's trying to like defend that he's looking into this by saying that he believes discipline is a way of showing love.
Uh-huh.
And Fran's like, oh, this is a new side of you. I find it intriguing.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so at that time I counted this as still the same scene. Um
that's
and
fine.
kind of continues, but she notices a cat out on the terrace, and it turns out that Maxwell has actually been feeding this cat. And Fran's like, I thought you hated cats. And he's like, no, no, I hate Andrew Lloyd Webber's cats.
Exactly.
And so they're out on the balcony because Maxwell feeds, this kitten, and he knows that it gets hungry. And so he puts out some food, and he's like, here, shoes. And it turns out Roger Clinton's cat is um, Socks's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Fran's just kind of like, shoes, socks. And you think these people are creative to do enough to do whitewater. Um, But anyway, as they're out there, they discover a bird's nest. I believe Fran's the one who sees it. And there's
Yeah.
actually 3 little birds' eggs um, in the nest. And Maxwell comments like, "Oh, isn't it a little bit late, to lay eggs? Because usually it's the spring." And Fran immediately is just like, "Well, it's the '90s. Like maybe she's just waiting around for that gray streaked pigeon to come on over." And like all of the stuff where like as children we wouldn't really get what she's talking about
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah. So she says, hey, it's the 90s. She don't have to lay eggs the minute she moves out of her parents' nest. Maybe she spent the last 3 years sitting on somebody else's eggs, waiting for that certain gray streaked pigeon to make his move.
Exactly. And that's the end of that scene. Do you have anything to add?
My only question for you is, do you think Maxwell understood what she was saying?
Well, he does kind of have like an expression on his face at the end of it, um,
Hmm.
which again I think you could interpret it either way. I think he kind of probably knew because this is post the thing.
Correct.
It's a pretty pointed comment. So
Oh, yes.
what about you?
I mean, I thought his look was more confused than like embarrassed or like understanding.
Hmm.
So that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
All right. So we're now in Brighton's room. which, so for scene 4, we're in Brighton's room, and I'll point out that we've seen Brighton's room before. We saw it back at the very beginning of season 2, and it looked absolutely nothing like it looks now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
This is actually a pretty small room.
exactly. And it's
Considering-
dark,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's like a third of the size of the room he had before. And the only thing that's the same is that the door is on the same side.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Fran comes in and she asks Brighton what he's doing, because he's putting lipstick on and then kissing his hand. And he explains that this is my science project. Maggie gave me the idea. See, I'm going to compare the different types of lipsticks to see which one's going to stay on the longest. And he kisses his hand. He's like, oh, that's great. And Fran's like, that's not going to get you an A in science, but it will definitely get you out of military school. And Brighton's like, you're right, it stinks. You know what? Military school might not be so bad. Fran, when I'm gone, I want you to have my room. And Fran's like, oh, honey, stop it. I don't want it. Sure, I could break through that wall and create a fabulous dressing area with a tremendous walk-in closet, but I don't need that. I need you. And then she stomps on the floor. Are these hardwood floors under here?
Mhm.
And Brighton, Brighton can't think of anything. And he's just like, if only I could come up with a great science project. And Fran's like, well, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you with that, mister. You're going to have to think about that all on your own. And we see Maxwell walk by as she's saying this. And then she like lowers her voice. Okay, here's my idea. There are 3 abandoned eggs in a nest on the terrace. I thought you can incubate them with a heat lamp, and then you can document the hatching. And Brighton's like, Fran, that's a great idea. How'd you think of it? And my favorite line in this entire episode, well, who knows more about eggs just sitting around going to waste than me?
Mhm. And
Again.
she has that look on her face.
Yep. And it's, again, one of those things that we wouldn't fully understand as children. But now that we're, grown up, mature adults, we understand what she is saying.
Mhm.
So do you have anything you want to add, or would you like to take us into the hallway?
I will take us into the hallway. And in the hallway, we have Cece in a black, long, nightgown.
Negligee,
Yes, I was
shall
gonna
we
say
say?
that, but yeah. And she actually has 2 drinks in hand, and she's knocking on Maxwell's door. And she says, Maxwell, I thought we might have a little nightcap. And then we hear through the door Maxwell's voice saying, I don't want I don't want to do it at the house. Meet me at the Regency Hotel in an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Cece's face, like her eyes get wide, like she then runs down the hallway. And of course, Niles then comes out from Maxwell's bedroom holding a tape recorder, and he is very pleased with himself.
Oh, yes.
And then Maxwell walks up to him in the hallway and is like wondering, oh, were you looking for me or did you need something? And Niles covers it up by asking Maxwell how the meeting went at the Regency. Did Pavarotti agree to sing? I'm gonna mispronounce this.
Pagliacci.
Pagliacci at your benefit? And Maxwell's like, oh yes, after I buttered him up. I said, and at this point, Niles has the recorder up again. And Maxwell says, I've dreamed of seeing you dressed like a clown. Oh God, it would be thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell's oblivious to all this, but Niles is very pleased that he has gotten this recorded, and he just kind of says thank you and walks away.
Yeah.
Anything you'd like to add to that?
No. Well, actually, yes. One thing, when Cece goes to knock on the door, she, says something along, you're right. She asks if he wants to have a little nightcap, but she like lowers her voice and says nightcap. Like,
yeah, suggestively.
I think that's what she was trying for, but I didn't think it came across like that.
Yeah, it's her attempt at being suggestive.
Exactly. Seductive even.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So shall I take us to the living room?
Yes.
So Gracie is walking by, or I should say she's ambling by using crutches. And Fran's like, honey, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, the Limited is having a blowout sale. And Fran's just like, sweetie, what are you thinking? That's tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then Grace is like, oh, okay. And she like walks away normally. The phone rings and it's Brighton, and he has a favor to ask Fran. He needs her to turn on the heat lamps on the eggs for 15 minutes. And Fran's like, I'm not supposed to help you. And he's like, come on, Fran, you've been like a mother to me. And she's like, forget it, B. It's not going to work. He's like, of course, you're far too young to be a mother. And she's like, all right, it worked. This is the last time I want to hear about your stupid eggs, Zama, Ma. Because as she was saying the eggs, guess who walks in? Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of like him continuing on his way, like one would expect, he says, oh, is that your mother? I need to speak with her. And he grabs the phone from her. Sylvia, hello. Listen, about those tickets you wanted. And Brighton like panics a little and pretends to be Sylvia. Can't talk now. I'm nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
And Maxwell just is like confused and hands the phone back to Fran. And Fran says, I hope to see you soon, Ma. Get it? Or your father is going to be sending us both to military school. And then she adds to herself, of course, I could use a good few men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scene.
Well, Cece walks in.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Cece walks in, and she's kind of standoffish with Maxwell.
Oh, I counted this as a separate scene.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Well, then I'll say it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So like she's kind of like, and Maxwell's like, oh, you haven't really been talking. Like, what's wrong? And Cece kind of again, obviously upset. What happened to the little meeting at the Regency? Oh, I decided to handle it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And Cece gets kind of a look on her face, and then she's like, Maxwell, I would have loved to have helped you. And he again
Mm-hmm.
is just kind of like looking through things, oblivious to the context, what she's interpreting. And he goes, well, it went much faster without you. And
Uh-huh.
Cece's just kind of like, oh, wide-eyed.
Yeah, a little embarrassed or uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And again, another little exchange we would not have understood as children.
Correct. Um since we could like cut these scenes differently, would you like to take the next scene? Because otherwise I have a lot of big scenes, you have very small ones.
Okay, that's fine. I will take it. So we are in the living room, and Fran and Maggie are sitting there watching An Affair to Remember, and they're both kind of crying. And Fran's kind of yelling at the screen, not yelling, but saying to the screen, "Tell him you can't walk. Tell him he ruined your life." She says one other thing I didn't catch,
Make
but
him feel guilty.
yeah, and then she says to herself, "Well, obviously she isn't Jewish."
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, so the movie ends, and Maggie is saying that she's too upset to study. So now I have to go out and get some burgers with my friends. Thanks, Fran.
Mm-hmm.
So Maggie leaves. Brighton comes in, having been at the mall, and Fran's like, "How could you have spent so much time there?" And he's like, essentially like, "This coming from you. You spent 2 hours at potatoes, potatoes, potatoes." And Fran defends herself by saying, "Hey, there's over 80 toppings." Um, but yeah, it is kind of funny that Fran would be like lecturing someone for being at the mall for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, she's laying into him though, like, what are you gonna do when I'm married and have kids? Too busy with that. And he kind of looks at her, and she's like, okay, bad example.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, well, it's just turning on the light. It's not a big deal. And she's like, you're right. It's not a big deal. It would be a big deal if I didn't turn it off. And then she gets like this look on her face, like, oh, oh. And then Brighton picks up on that because she's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh God, I'm going to boot camp. Um, and then they rush out. I counted this together, but I don't know if you did.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So we rush out to the balcony thing, and there's these heat lamps, they're still on. And and Fran goes to pick one up, and she's like, "Oh, it's that's fine." And then she drops it, and they're like, think it broke? And it's like, yeah. And then
There's a Humpty Dumpty reference.
yes, because like I think Brighton asks if it could be like, put together or whatever. And Fran says, you obviously haven't read Humpty Dumpty. And then she's like, oh wait, it's fine. And like she picks up, it's hard boiled. And then
Hmm.
so Brighton is like, Fran, I'm very modest. Do you think I could get a private latrine?
No.
And she's like, I think we can salvage this. Um, with some salt. Because again, it's a hard boiled egg. Uh yeah. Brighton's obviously not going to be able to pursue that for his science project.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to that scene?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. So Niles has the phone, and we hear from coming from the phone, "This is Cece Babcock. Please leave a message at the sound of the tone." There's the tone, and Niles presses play on his little recorder. "I've dreamed of seeing you dressed like a clown. Oh God, it would be thrilling." And that's Maxwell's voice. He hangs up, and then he starts singing "Working 9 to 5" by Dolly Parton.
Does a little jig with it, like he's
He does.
happy.
He's so pleased with himself. Um, So Fran comes in and she says, Niles, I was thinking that Mr. Sheffield's right. If I help Brighton with this project, it's only going to hurt him. And Niles totally sees through it, her comment entirely. "You've already gotten involved and screwed up." And she's like, "Yeah. And now there's really nothing I can do except to tell Mr. Sheffield the truth. Here's the two things I came up with." Um, and which is kind of funny because she said she's going to tell him the truth. And in comes Sylvia, and she's holding this large shopping bag with two antennas, moving antennas sticking out. And she's like, "Fran, I brought you one of Uncle Stanley's lobsters. You gotta try." And Fran looks at it and says, I'm not eating that thing. Never mind the two tails. It's got eyebrows." And
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia says, you are so critical. That's why you're not married." And Fran's like, "Meanwhile, Ma, what's with this big rash all over your chest?" Sylvia looks down. "Oh, look, it's up here now. I think it's your father's beard. I also got one on my calf, my knee, my thigh." And Fran's like, all right, you don't need to draw me a picture. "I think you should put on some calamine lotion and soak in a lukewarm tub." And Sylvia doesn't need to be told twice. All right. And so she goes upstairs to use the Sheffield's tub. And Niles is like, "You didn't mean here, did you?" Fran's like, "No." Well, in comes Maxwell, who tells Fran that he's very proud of Brighton because he's been so busy working on a science project, and that he hasn't left his room all day. And Fran's like, "Oh." And Maxwell's, of course, asks, "You haven't helped him, have you?" And Fran's like, "Please believe me, I've been of no help to him at all." And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "Oh, good. Here's a little bonus in your paycheck this week." "Ah, thanks," she says. And, Niles shouts after Maxwell, who's walking out the door, "I haven't helped him either." And he's like, Niles turns to Fran, "What's your secret?" And she's like, "I keep telling you, Niles, big hair and short skirts. That's what got Mel Gibson the Oscar."
Mm-hmm.
And then Niles, of course, asks, "Well, what happened to telling Mr. Sheffield the truth?" And she's like, "Well, I decided to take the road more traveled. Now, all I have to do is get Brighton an extension on his project. And I've never met a teacher that I couldn't wrap around my little pinky." She says that last part as she's unbuttoning the green sweater she's wearing. And Niles points out that his teacher's a woman. And Fran's like, "Oh, got any cash?"
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to add anything, or would you like to take us to Brighton School?
I'll take us to Brighton School.
Excellent.
So we have Fran walk into the classroom and she kind of was like, this feels like deja vu. And then as an audience, we kind of see um, the classroom expand. We see a girl who has large hair, smacking gum like Fran is also chewing gum at this point, and she's doing her makeup. And so Fran kind of goes up to her, "Oh, detention?" And the girl's like, "Yeah, I was putting on makeup in my class." And she has like a thick accent, and like Fran's like pulled out her compact as well and is like putting on her makeup. She's like, "Yeah, you shouldn't do that in class. You're here to learn."
Mm-hmm.
And the girl goes on to say that her plan is to marry a doctor, live in Great Neck, after her parents move to Boca, or wait for her parents to move to Boca.
After her mother moves to Boca. Yeah.
And Fran kind of gives her a look like, what do you think about being domestic? Like, you learn to love it. Because again, we have it's obvious that this girl is another Fran, and that's even made further apparent when in walks in who but the stern-faced lady from Loman's.
Mm-hmm.
And cute sweater. Because Fran is wearing the green sweater that they were fighting over.
Yep.
And so Fran's like, Mrs. Richardson? And the teacher, Mrs. Richardson, sends Francine away. That's
The
the
little
girl,
girl. Yeah.
Francine.
Yep.
And then so Fran tries to um, as Mrs. Richardson's walking to the front of the classroom, Fran's kind of trailing behind, like, oh, I'm meaning to tell you, we're so sorry for how my twin sister acted.
Mm-hmm.
And and again, like, this teacher is not very pleasant. And, like, you took the green sweater. And Fran, though, like, reaches out to shake her hand. And it's like, well, like, I'm Brighton's nanny, and we were hoping for an extension. And the teacher's like, "What's this?" And she's like, Fran's like, "It's a 50, and now you have it." And then the teacher hands it back. Um, and she goes, "Have you ever wanted anything so bad you can taste it, only to have it ripped away from your hands and then ripped away? Well, now like." Trying to compare like the $50 exchange with that, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran, of course, it's not a pleasant feeling.
No.
um and then she's like, "Are you chewing gum in my class?" And Fran's just kind of like, mm-hmm. And the teacher demands that she put the gum on her nose, which Fran does. And
Mm-hmm.
then the teacher further instructs Fran to sit down and think about what she's done.
Right.
So Fran's just kind of sitting there with gum in her nose, like a chastened child, basically.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to that scene?
The one thing I'll add is that when Mrs. Richardson says, now we'll just sit here for a while you think about your actions, miss. Fran says, how did she know I was a miss?
Yep.
All right, so we go home and Fran is very excited and tells Brighton that she got his teacher to give him an extension. Now, all you have to do is come up with a new science project. And he's like, great, because I already got one. Check this out. And he hands her a Polaroid. And Fran's like, ew, B, that's disgusting. Gnug with the moldy fruit already. And he's like, no, that's your mother's back. And of course, Sylvia's sitting on the couch. And Fran's like, Ma, don't you think you should give up on the lobster already? And she's like, well, okay, maybe they're a little suspicious. I'll start on the 10 pounds of shrimp Uncle Stanley caught. And so Sylvia's now walking towards the door. And Fran's like, well, do they look normal? And Sylvia's like, what they? It's one shrimp. And so she leaves. Brighton has gone upstairs. And Maxwell comes in and he's looking, he wants to know where Brighton is. And so Fran tells him, oh, he's upstairs working on a science project. And Max was like, oh God, this is terrible. I forgot to feed Roger Clinton's cat today. And now the eggs are missing out of the nest. I'm afraid the cat must have eaten them. And Fran's like, oh, why didn't I think of that? And Max was like, you did. You warned me. And Fran's like, you're right. I did warn you, but you didn't listen, did you? And Max was like, I've ruined everything. How could I be such a screw up? And Fran's like, well, there's only one thing for you to do, mister. Get your boots and your sleeping bag. And he's like, what? You're going to send me to military school? And she's like, no, I just thought we could have some fun. And needless to say, his reaction was, Miss Fine. And she's like, oh, calm down. I'm sure I can get an extension from the teacher. Now we just have to come up with a new idea for the kid. And he's like, there'll be a considerable bonus in it for you. And good luck with the teacher. I hear she's pretty tough. And she's like, oh, well, don't you worry about her. I'll take care of everything. And of course, Niles walked in just the time that Maxwell was promising a considerable bonus. And he says to her, you already got Brighton an extension? And she's like, oh, yeah. And he's like, how'd you do that? Fran's like, oh, Niles, I just reasoned with the woman. You can't argue with logic. And then she unzips She says that as she's unzipping her white jacket, takes off her jacket, and all we see she's wearing is the green bra that had been under the green sweater.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything you want to add, or would you like to take us to the scene on the under the credits?
I will take us to the scene, the credit scene.
Excellent.
So we are once again at Maxwell's door, and Niles is outside of it. And we hear Maxwell say, "Run out to Kennedy Airport and pick up Pavarotti. You'd better leave now. 2 lanes are closed on LIE. It'll take you hours." And like Niles is obviously not too pleased to hear that he has to go run this. So he goes down the hall, and then the door opens, and there Cece is with the recorder and a clown nose on.
Mm-hmm.
Payback. And that's
Exactly.
the scene. And that's the episode.
Correct. Bernadette, is there anything you want to talk about thematically before we get into our shticks? Bernadette? I'm going to take that as a no. And why don't we jump into some favorite fashion? There was not as much fashion in this episode as I was hoping
Okay,
for.
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
excellent.
Here. As soon as you said Bernadette, it went silent, and I was like, yes.
Sorry about that. I was just going to cover it.
Oh, okay, no. This is life.
Exactly.
Difficulties.
Favorite fashion.
Yeah.
What did you think of the sweater they were fighting over?
So, like, this is being I mean, I understand stereotyping, but it was a pretty cut low, it was a cropped sweater.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't really seem like the teacher's style.
Agreed.
So yeah. And there was also a large bin full of sweaters. I'm sure they could have probably found another one. But yeah. I personally don't think it was worth fighting over. What about you?
I agree. I mean, it's like a very pale mint.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if it was darker, it'd be nicer, but I don't know. To me, it also didn't scream Fran because it was kind of muted for her. So yeah, I think they didn't need to fight over it.
Yeah. But I knew that she was going to end up giving it up.
As soon as you saw the
Yep.
Yeah, as soon as you saw the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Was there an outfit that you liked or didn't like, or anything that stuck out to you besides
Not
the sweater?
Not particularly for me. What about you?
I didn't care for Fran's yellow and black outfit. So it's like, I think the yellow jacket is kind of that like petroleum product that Maxwell's mother had commented on previously. I didn't mind the black and yellow shirt underneath. I just didn't care for that. I kind of liked her pink and white outfit. So she seemed to wear a lot of white in this episode, because she was wearing this pink skirt with a white turtleneck and then a pink jacket, like a vest, open vest over it. And then in one scene, and then when she went to go talk to the teacher, she was wearing a white skirt with a white headband and then the green sweater with the white jacket over it. So she seemed to wear a lot of white this time around.
Yeah. Well, and she had headbands again.
She did.
Because the girl, Francine, also had a headband. They were kind of matching it a bit in that scene.
If you have nothing else in fashion, can we jump into notable New Yorkers on that comment?
Yes.
Did you recognize the girl playing Francine?
Okay, she looked familiar. I feel like she was in a lot of 90s things.
She was on The Nanny. She played cousin Tiffany in The Family Plumbing.
Ah, well, there you go.
Yeah. And I think we see her in other episodes as well. Not too many, of course. But yeah, so she's played by Tiffany Koenig. And yeah, she plays young Fran in other episodes.
Yeah, so this is what, like the third child actor that's been on it.
I'm sorry. I totally flipped that. The character is Tiffany Koenig. The actress is Jackie Tone. That's why. Sorry.
Okay.
I apologize for that if she's listening, I apologize. But this is what I know you best from. So
So, so this is what, like the third child actor who plays multiple
yes.
characters?
Yes, and actually, I'm totally wrong. I'm looking on at our friend's webpage, IMDb. She's actually only in The Bird's Nest and Family Plumbing. I thought she played young Fran in another episode as well, but I'm mistaken.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
sorry.
So going back to the top of the episode.
Please, sorry. I wanted to start there.
Oh no, it's fine. Yeah. So we've had on multiple occasions, like recently, I think it was like even last episode. So we've had Lomans all the time, and then Donna Karen came up recently as well.
Calvin Klein and John.
Yeah. Jumanji, though, that clip, they've like straight up took the clip from the movie Jumanji. And then
so for those who do not know, Jumanji was a 1995 American fantasy film that starred Robin Williams, Kristen Dunst, Bonnie Hunt, Jonathan Hyde, and others. It centered on a supernatural board game that ended up releasing jungle-based hazards with every turn the players took. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
We have another movie, Babe,
which we've talked about recently. It's the talking pig film.
You mentioned we talked about John before. Let's see here.
Rockaway Beach.
I that's a real place.
It is. So according to our friends at NYCGovParks.org, it is and I quote, a year-round resource for residents all along the Rockaway Peninsula, and it comes alive each summer from Memorial Day weekend through Labor Day weekend with millions of visitors, where beachgoers can enjoy the sand and water, the variety of concessions, and the city's only legal surfing beach.
Is there, I don't know if I wrote it down, was there a Few Good Men reference or not?
There was, yes. A Few Good Men was a 1992 legal drama following the court-martial of two Marines who were charged with murdering another Marine. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Again, for the umpteenth time, a reference to Andrew Lloyd Webber and cats.
Correct. How about the other cat that was mentioned?
Yeah. So there's Roger Clinton's cats, apparently. Shoes and socks.
Socks actually was the only pet in the Clinton White House originally. He then actually got displaced by Buddy the dog. And after Bill Clinton left office, Socks went to live with Betty Curie, who was the former Clinton secretary. Socks, unfortunately, was euthanized in 2009. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Whitewater?
A political controversy in the 1990s that involved a real estate development firm, and the Clintons, obviously.
Yeah.
According to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep. Let's see here. Do you want to jump in?
Sure.
There's the Pavarotti.
Yeah, so Pavarotti was an Italian opera singer whose nickname was the King of the High Seas. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. Pagliacci, we actually talked about, I feel like only a few weeks ago, but that's an Italian opera about an actor who murdered his wife and her lover during a performance. Sounds like a real upper. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia. The Regency Hotel is a luxury hotel in Manhattan's Upper East Side. It's known for its Art Deco design and modern sensibilities. That's according to our friends at loweshotels.com. Let's see, there was also Humpty Dumpty. That's a nursery rhyme.
There was an Affair to Remember.
Yes, that's a 1957 romance, which involved these characters who are romantically involved with other people, but they meet on a ship and they form a friendship and they have a relationship, and then they're supposed to meet at the, I think it was the top of the Empire State Building,
Mhm.
after ending their relationships and starting new careers. But then, the woman doesn't show up because she's hit by a car trying to get there. And then the artist, he's brokenhearted, but I think he ends up selling a piece to a woman who, you know, I honestly haven't seen it, but
Oh, I
long.
have.
Oh, so please jump in. I'm
It's been
murdering as
like
this is.
it's been over a decade since I've watched it, but yeah, essentially, he ends up going to her apartment at the end, and she's just like sitting on the couch. And at first, she doesn't come out and say it, like he's about to leave, and then it turns out he realizes that like she didn't purposefully stand him up.
Correct.
But yeah,
Correct.
but that's why Fran's yelling like, "Tell him you can't walk,"
Right.
like because that would clear up like the misunderstanding. But I
Exactly.
think, and again, it's been a long time since I've actually like seen it. Um, I think she doesn't really want him to see her. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Like, you know.
She doesn't come. She doesn't tell him what happened. She's hiding her inability to walk. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, and uh, okay, like, so basically at the end, can I say at the end or no?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So like, again, they did. He's trying to get her to explain. She doesn't really explain. And then as he's leaving, he mentions a painting he had been working on when they first met, and he gave it away to a woman who liked it but had no money. Um, he's about to say it's a woman who is in a wheelchair when he suddenly starts suspecting that the woman's been like on the couch the entire time. So he walks into her bedroom, sees the painting hanging on the wall, realizes she's the woman in the wheelchair. And basically, at the end of the movie, it ends with them in a tight embrace. And the woman says, "If you can paint, I can walk. Anything can happen, don't you think?" Because that's why Fran and Maggie are crying at the end.
Hmm.
Yeah, so there you go.
Also an upper,
Yeah.
just like
Well, I
Pagliacci.
mean, at least it's hopeful they got back together.
Fair.
Uh,
We missed Howard Stern, so he's
yeah.
a notable radio personality.
Okay. Is potatoes a thing?
I looked and I did not find a store named
Okay.
Potatoes.
Okay. 'Cause I was like, potatoes. I've never heard of that. That would be interesting though.
I did find the potato place, but it's not in New York, it's in Michigan.
Okay. Um, we have uh Niall singing Working 9 to 5. You mentioned a song by Dolly Parton.
Hmm.
Um, let's see here. Did you have I mean,
There was a Mel Gibson
oh
reference,
yeah, that's true. Mel Gibson.
which ties into our 90s nostalgia for later, that he would be a reference on the show. I didn't understand the reference to him getting an Oscar for big hair and a short skirt.
Wouldn't it be for Braveheart?
I do not know.
Well, we'll look it up quickly. I would think it's for Braveheart because he wears like a kilt and stuff.
Oh, okay.
That's
Because
the first thing.
I googled, Mel Gibson, big hair, short skirt, Oscar, and I was redirected back to, I think, the IMDb page for this episode of The Nanny.
Oh,
So I was
really?
just like, okay, I don't know.
Uh-huh. Um, I mean, that's my guess. I don't know if he won for that or not.
Well, according to Fran, he did.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my guess because that would have been around 1995. Yeah, he got winner of Academy Award for Best Director and Academy Award for Best Picture.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's my guess is Braveheart.
After that, we missed one. We missed Last Tango in Paris.
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
1972 erotic drama starring Marlon Brando, Maria Schneider, and Jean-Pierre Luad, which is about a recently widowed American woman, who engages in an anonymous sexual relationship with a young woman in Paris. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mhm.
And then I'm out.
There you go. I think I'm out as well. So we actually have some Yiddish cop this week.
Not too much. Everyone knows where I'm going to start, and I'm going to point out that lobsters and shrimp are treif and therefore not kosher. So again, for creatures coming out of the sea, in order for them to be kosher and therefore fit for consumption under kashrut or the Jewish dietary laws, they need to have fins and scales, and lobsters and shrimp have neither. Or as one of my friends put it, they're basically sea bugs, which are also not kosher. And then the two other terms, yuts,
Mhm.
that's what Sylvia calls Morty. It's a foolish or incompetent person, basically like it's not a term of endearment, shall we say.
Mhm.
And then the last one was genug, which we've heard before, which is basically enough. Stop. Shh. Quiet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I miss any?
I don't think so. It's just that
Awesome.
we don't typically have, like, they're not as common terms than some of the other terms that come up.
True. True. 90s nostalgia.
Yes.
There was
So
a bunch.
there was. Again, Sylvia saying that they got a car phone.
Mm-hmm.
Very nostalgic.
Agreed. I don't know if you noticed in Brighton's room, he had not a flat screen television
Yeah.
and an old computer and an old printer on his wall.
Yeah. I mean, and I'm pretty sure, no, I'm sure that Fran and Maggie are probably watching a VHS.
Uh-huh. Using a VCR.
Yes. We have the Polaroid. Now that has made a comeback in recent years where people like get Polaroids kind of for nostalgia, but I mean that was more 90s.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice how Brighton called Fran from the
Yes.
mall? He used a payphone.
Yep. A payphone. Um, yeah, because definitely he would be on his cell phone texting instead of
Mm-hmm.
calling. And so there would be no risk of Maxwell thinking Sylvia's on the phone.
True.
Yeah. Um,
I,
so the recorder that Niles uses, I
oh,
mean,
yeah.
you could now just use your cell phone to
True.
record.
True.
So
Old
yeah,
cars.
yeah,
How could we forget?
that's
Old
old.
cars.
And then I feel like, I don't know, I'm sure it still happens, but like there's so much online shopping these days. I don't know to what extent I mean, I'm sure it still happens occasionally, but the
Yeah.
whole shopping thing, right? I mean, if you can get it online for sale, I'd rather do that than venture into like a place where I would have see things that would haunt me for the rest of my shopping years.
Right. I mean, it makes me think of, the Black Friday, like Michigas, where people are getting injured because there's such a large crowd trying to race in and
Hmm.
things like that. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Okay. So some future fun.
I do have some future fun for us. So in season 5, Fran and Gracie are concerned that Maxwell is going to send Gracie away to boarding school. But actually, it turns out he only sent away for a brochure about a summer drama program on a boarding school's grounds that he thought Gracie would like. Fran was also not happy there about the idea of him sending her baby away. Um, as we saw here, Niles was very jealous of Maxwell giving Fran bonuses for shall we say, less than stellar behavior. But in the episode, the ex Niles actually quits his job in the Sheffield home because he read a credit card application in Fran's room in which she lied and overstated her earnings significantly, meaning he thought that he was underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually see Fran and Val talking as Fran's filling out the paper credit card application. And Fran explains that the last time that when she put her real salary, they sent her an application for, I think, government cheese.
Mm.
So yeah, so we're gonna see Niles quit his job because he thinks he's underpaid, and he actually gets hired by Aunt Frida. So something to look forward to. And then finally, Fran's eggs do not entirely go to waste. At the very end of the series, she has twins, a boy and a girl. So something to
Wow.
look forward to. I won't say who the father is.
Yeah. Quickly, because I know this might bug you. I
Sure.
realized you had wanted to talk about something in 90s nostalgia regarding the Mel Gibson reference.
Oh, it was just the comment that he probably wouldn't be a reference nowadays
Yes.
after
Okay.
some of his anti-Semitic comments.
Yep.
So yeah,
Especially like in a show like The Nanny.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So, before we get into the ratings this time, I want to talk a little bit. I thought that the new idea for for the science thing would be the actual lobster itself, not Sylvia's rash.
Yeah.
What were you expecting the rash?
I mean, I guess my thought is, except for the hatching of the eggs, I don't really know how any of these things are a science project.
True.
Because, like, for example, the moldy fruit, what's he going to do? Just take pictures and be like, on day 1, the fruit looked fine. On day 5, the fruit was totally covered in white mold. On day 10, it just like,
Yeah.
what's he doing there? And then as for even with the lobster, like, what's he going to do? Like, just look what was caught off Rockaway Beach. It looks weird, but like, he doesn't know why. He wouldn't be able to explain that. And then as for Sylvia's skin, like, again, what is he doing besides photographing and being like, look how disgusting this is?
Yeah. I still don't think he's going to get a great grade on
Oh
his
no,
science project.
no, no, I don't think so.
Also, I feel like that lady, um, yeah, doesn't impress me as a teacher.
Mrs. Richardson,
Yeah, I don't think she has the personality for
the warmth.
for being a good teacher.
Yeah.
I have concerns.
Also, her name is Mrs. Richardson, but we learned in the first episode, the first scene, that her boyfriend just left her for her brother,
Yep.
not
I
her
was also
husband.
thinking about that, like the continuity is not quite there.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah.
Um, yeah.
So I guess it's time, unless you have something else you want to discuss.
I'll just point out that we've skipped over, there is no kiss count edition, and we have an episode where Fran did not remind Maxwell about the thing. So,
Yeah, this was more subtle with the bird thing, but she didn't
mhm,
say the thing.
exactly. All right, I'm ready to rate the episode if you are.
Okay, so again, lovely listeners, we rate the episodes 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. But we make everything up, so we can always change it later on.
Correct.
Um, so I believe I'm going first this week.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, excellent. Go ahead.
So, uh, not like a huge fan of this episode, just because, again, it, what was it trying to say? I mean, Fran got away with it, Brighton got away with it. The major entertainment for me for this episode was Niles and Cece like
Mm-hmm.
pranking each other. Um, like, again, not a fan of the teacher. I'll just give it a 3.
Okay.
You?
I'm really glad you went first because you basically said everything I wanted to say. Um, this is not an episode to go out of my way to watch. I don't hate it. I don't love it. Um, it's sort of blah, it sort of blends into the background. Like, obviously there were episodes last season that we really enjoyed and were obviously like standout stellar episodes. This is just not that. I don't love it. I don't hate it. So I'm also going to give it a 3.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, season 4 is not really off to a great start for us.
Yes.
So
Yep. But we'll see where it goes from here.
exactly. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't believe so. How about
Uh,
you?
nope.
Okay.
All right. That's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 79, The Rosie Show.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.